deep sea divers. What are your horror stories? I dive a lot, several times a week. My area has a lot of theoretically dangerous things: sharks and barracudas, morays and stingrays, blue-ringed octopuses, cone snails, box jellies, siphonophores of all kinds, sea snakes, stonefishes and scorpionfishes, venomous catfish, crown-of-thorns starfish, and various sea urchins that can hurt you in several different ways, titan triggerfish, and so on and so on. But only one thing has ever got me. Twice. Are you ready? Clownfish, like Nemo. They are territorial and brave, and will get in your face if you're near their anemones. I usually respect their space, but I was distracted watching something else a couple of times, and turns out they will actually bite if you don't leave their space fast enough. For real though, I don't have particular horror stories, but the scariest moments are probably when I get caught in strong currents and have to crawl on the bottom to fight it, going hand over hand like I'm climbing a horizontal wall. Despite what a lot of people tend to think, especially looking at the daunting list of dangerous animals in my area, sea critters aren't your problem. You leave them alone and it's fine. Sea conditions like waves or currents, and above all human error, are the real killers. Edit, I just remembered an incident that did scare me. It was a human error/equipment failure issue. When you're diving, you want to ascend to the surface slowly. This is because under pressure, your blood and tissues can hold more gases, in particular inert nitrogen from your compressed air, dissolved in it than when you're at the surface. And as you ascend to the surface, these dissolved gases have to return to being gases. If you're slow, you just breathe it out as you come up. But if you're too fast, they turn into bubbles of gas in your arteries and veins before they can be vented out. This causes embolisms as well as decompression sickness, aka the bends. I was diving with a friend at about 25 meters from the 82 feet when her old beat-up BCD, the vest that you can inflate with air to control your buoyancy, started to inflate on its own. This has happened to me before as well, but I just disconnected the air hose from the BC immediately and carried on, and went on to do about 10 dives with a busted BC that I only inflated manually. She didn't think to do that, or didn't have time to do that. This happened very quickly. I saw that she was having buoyancy control issues. She was upside down kicking to try to stay down, but in the few seconds it took for me to realize how bad the problem was, she was already at the surface. Basically, I quickly glanced around to see if there was a rock I could use to weigh her down, and when I turned back, she was gone. I followed her up, but not too quickly. And even so, my dive computer was beeping warnings at me. When we met up, I wondered why she didn't use her dump valve. There is a valve at the bottom of the BC exactly for releasing air when you are feet up, especially since she was experienced and should know to do that. Then I saw that the string you pull to open the valve was missing, so it was literally impossible to dump the air when oriented that way. So check your gear before you use it. I was pretty worried that she would come down with the bends, but she was fine. People are often worried that I dive alone a lot, but honestly, all of my scariest and most anxious moments were problems occurring with other people. Throwaway account, as this story is well known among my circles, and it would be easy to identify me. I grew up in Oz. When I was 15, I took the family boat out and dove the reef myself to clear my head. Mistake number 1. I was down at a depth of about 28 meters, 90 feet, when I was only rated for 60 feet, mistake number 2. Whilst diving, I spotted a 3-diver mako shark coming right at me. For those who are unaware, makos are basically the cheetahs of the ocean, and they only have 2 speeds: curious, harmless, and lunch, very much harmful. This guy was in lunch mode, so I hovered, as I had been trained to do, as there would be no way for me to outmaneuver it or escape it. Nowadays, we dive with shark shields, which emit electronic pulses that freak the sharks out and keep them away. But back then, what we used was essentially a chainmail sleeve. The idea being that sharks hate the taste of metal, so if you give it your arm, it'll bite down, decide you're gross, and move along. So I wait, and it comes, and I do a perfect move to give the beastie my arm. Just before the crunch, however, it occurred to me that I had left my sleeve on my bed, mistake number 3. I had my kelp knife drawn and stabbed it right as it bit me. It swam off, and I was alive, however, Now I had a series of problems. First, I had huge open gashing wounds on my arm from the bite in open water and was trailing blood everywhere. Second, once the shock wore off, you realize that you're in salt water and salt and open wounds don't feel good. Third, in a panic, I dropped my weight belt and shot up to the surface without any sort of waiting period. Hello, Benz. Mistake number 4. Fourth, because I hadn't been paying attention to the currents, I was approximately a quarter mile downstream of my boat, which means I had to swim up to it. Mistake number 5. 5. When I got to the boat, I really started to wish I had done as my dad had said and had the comms fixed. Mistake 6. Or that I had upgraded the first aid kit like I had been threatening to do. Mistake 7. So I end up racing back to shore with nothing more than a tourniquet to staunch the bleeding. Long story short, my series of unfortunate self-inflicted events earned me 172 stitches, boatloads of physical therapy because the shark had actually bitten down on my tricep and detached it, and easily identifiable scars on one of my arms for the rest of my life. Oh, and I lost my deceased grandfather's favorite kelp knife that he had left me. Saved someone from drowning while scuba diving. Person had an epileptic seizure at 85 feet of water in a pitch-black cavern that I was diving also. I was hovering above, just watching the flashlights move about when I noticed one flashlight not moving. I swam down and was met with the other diver with no regulator in their mouth. Eyes open and just on their knees. The diver's buddy was next to them and in complete shock to what was going on and was not assisting whatsoever. 15 years of diving and instructor training came over me like it was second nature. I thought her regulator just came out, so I popped mine out and offered it to her, that when I noticed she had done, mentally checked out. I popped my number 2 regulator in my mouth and attempted to put my number 1 regulator in her mouth, but her teeth were completely clenched. I then pressed the purged button to get air into her mouth and noticed her cheeks moving, so I know air was getting in there. That was good enough for me. I then grabbed her under her arm and get the regulator flowing in her mouth and swan to the opening of the cavern and then up over 60 feet to get her to the surface. One on the surface did everything I was trained to do. Inflate BC, dumped her weights, got her on her back, and started towing to land. As I'm towing her in, she is regurgitating all the water she swallowed and inhaled. It seemed like gallons of water. Got her to land where other divers assisted me in getting all her gear off. She was breathing fine and alive, but in shock for a while, and slowly came around like nothing happened. We were very lucky that we were only 10 minutes into the dive, or for sure we would have both been bent and spending time in a hyperbaric chamber. The crazy thing is, she didn't tell anyone she had epilepsy, and when we later reviewed her consent form, she checked off no to epilepsy. I put myself at risk shooting up to the surface like that, but if I came across that situation again, I would not hesitate to save someone's life.